The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Evolutionary BPM, a new process methodology. Very happy to have you here today. It's an exciting webinar. I'm Ellie Stutz. I'm the Head of Knowledge and Collaboration at PNMsoft. And joining me today is our panelist, our special guest, Bruce Hardy of Solutions BPM, a U.S. PNMsoft partner. Hi there, Bruce.
Good morning, Ellie.
Now, just to give you a look at the format of this webinar, we're going to be discussing the traditional waterfall versus agile software development frameworks for just a little bit. We're going to be having a question and answer period with Bruce. We're going to be discussing the idea of evolutionary BPM with Bruce and how that fits in with traditional and newer models of software development. We're going to be showing a short demo of Sequence, PNMsoft's intelligent BPM product, and how it facilitates this new approach of evolutionary BPM. And we'll be taking your questions. We welcome you to already now, or through the course of the webinar, enter your questions in the GoToWebinar interface. There's a little questions widget, and you're welcome to write in your questions, and we'll field them. Bruce and I will field them towards the end of the webinar. Before I jump in, Bruce, you're actually having an exciting day today. I understand you're at an important event. Do you want to just tell us for a quick minute where you are and what you're doing there?
Sure, Ellie. I'm in Oklahoma City in the U.S. today. We're having a statewide summit on damage control and prevention for the utilities industry. This is an event where all the major pipeline operators, local utilities such as AT&T, your telcos, your cable networks, your gas pipeline operators, et cetera, group together for a few days and work out some of the issues associated with damage control in our state. Damage is a huge problem because, as everyone can imagine, when excavators are building new homes or whatever they're doing, even a homeowner planting a tree, can oftentimes result in major property damage, even loss of life. And the objective of this seminar, these next 3 days, is to find ways to reduce or eliminate those risks.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Let's jump into some of the ideas here. Now, in the past, I guess the first major software development approach that came to the fore was the waterfall approach. And this is a sequential approach that flows down like a waterfall, starting with requirements, down to design, through implementation, through verification, and then maintenance. And this approach originated in the manufacturing and construction industries, and these were very highly structured physical environments where after the fact changes are often prohibitively costly and sometimes impossible. And since no formal software development methodologies existed at the time, so this model was simply adapted for software development. And there are some problems with this model. First of all, it's generally impossible to achieve perfection the first time around. If you have changing requirements, you can't go backwards. You're only going in one direction. So you also have no way to learn from each stage and improve the stage beforehand. Lessons that you learned can't really improve your design or your implementation if they happen after the fact. And finally, it's a very long-winded, a long approach. It takes a long time for each stage, and there's no way back. So these are some of the issues with the traditional waterfall approach. And we're going to see as we go along if and how BPM fits in business process management projects fit into this approach or not. So again, the problem here that designers might not be aware of future difficulties when writing design for a software product that hasn't yet been implemented, so that when they do implement it, it may become clear that there's an area of the program that it's extraordinarily difficult to implement or could be inappropriate for the actual real-time situation, and that's really at the heart of the problem of the waterfall approach, which is a one-way approach. So really the solution would be that it would be better to actually revise that design instead of trying to go over and over again on implementation, which is faulty from the get-go and isn't responding to newly discovered problems. Okay, so that's the traditional approach. About 2001, 17 software developers meet in Snowboard, Utah. They discuss something different, something that's going to work better. They publish the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. And this is a new approach, an Agile approach, where the whole idea of just one design and one implementation, never going back, is said to be not good enough. And a cyclical approach is introduced, whereby development happens in cycles, even in sprint cycles, meaning they happen in actually very, very fast, rapid cycles. Updates, planning, a daily cycle, incremental improvements, review, retrospective, and then back to the update and planning again. And these cycles continue, and at each time a cycle goes through, if the product is good enough, it's released, even though it's maybe not 100% complete, and it still needs more improvement. But the learning and the feedback that is occurring here because of the release is very important in each subsequent cycle. One of these, I'm actually showing you a kind of a subset here of Agile software, which is Scrum, which is a particular kind of a subset of Agile software development, which is popular and very successful and adopted by many companies, where there's a lot of meetings, a Scrum Master. I'm not going to go into the whole, the webinar is not specifically about Scrum or Agile, but we're going to see as we go through the webinar, we're going to try to answer the question of where does BPM fit in between Agile, the Agile approach, and the waterfall approach. What's the ideal methodology for a business process management software development project, for a BPM project? So to answer that question, we have here with us, as you heard earlier, Bruce Hardy. Bruce is a PNMsoft partner. His company is Solutions BPM. He's from Tulsa, Oklahoma in the U.S. And he's worked since 1993 to improve the business performance of clients throughout North America. And he's worked for one of the largest consulting companies in the world. He specifically has expertise in supply chain in that field. He's worked with over 100 clients, and his reputation precedes him. So welcome again to the program, Bruce. It's the first time actually that we have a partner live on with us at the webinar, so it's quite exciting. Good to have you here, Bruce.
Oh, thank you, Ellie. It's a pleasure being here.
Okay, I remind you to just speak up as loud as you can. As you're at an event, we'd like to hear you as best we can. So the first question, okay, Bruce, for you today is, can you describe your method for enabling customers to build business processes?
Sure, Ellie, be happy to do that. Just to give people some background, I've actually been working with the BPM genre of software for probably 8 years, and I've been working with Sequence for probably 5 of those years. And we've developed a process around that we believe is superior to the traditional approach. And this is the traditional approach that you can see here. And I'm a bit of an old school software guy. I've been around a very long time doing this kind of thing. And I still see this approach used quite frequently, probably even more so than Agile or Waterfall or some of the others. And our approach is really best described as iterative software development through process discovery, because everything is focused on the process, not on the software development per se. As a bit of background on this thing, a couple of things I want to point out on the traditional approach, if I could, is note the silos, right? The silos have to be completed in sequence, one prior to the other, and the second thing is between each silo you would have a handoff. Handoffs tend to take the form of specifications, documentation, meetings, emails, discussions around the water cooler. I mean, you know what I mean, right? And the success of each silo is largely affected by the quality of the handoff. So the handoff is really important that we focus around that. And I guess the moral of the story is that the silos and handoffs are bad things, and we want to try to limit them as much as possible in our software development process. Hence, we created the BPM process. Ellie, if you'd fast forward one, please. This is the process that we endorse. It's an iterative approach. It is conducted more so by business users than IT development, and it's cyclical. And I think cyclical is the key here because it's a repeating cycle of design, document, validate, as opposed to design, build, develop, test, etc. So design, document, validate with all the stakeholders to the process present. An important aspect of the cycle is the time phasing of each phase in the cycle. In the perfect world, the time phasing is real-time, near instantaneous. That is, when a requirement is defined by a user for a business process, it's built in and validated by the users before moving forward. That way, all requirements are captured, documented, and validated in turn. Obviously, many iterations of the cycle must be completed before the job is done, and hence the idea of the iterative approach. Sequence is integral to this process because it's the canvas on which we map the process as described by users. That's essentially our design, if you will. As users are describing their process, we're putting in the big pieces such as activities and things like that. Then we publish that through sequence, sort of our documentation phase. Now, if users are getting their feedback to, well, okay, this is what I told you, this is what you're telling me I told you. And then in the third piece of this, the users can actually test against what the stakeholders are saying they actually do. That's the validation phase. That's like, I told you something, you repeated it back to me, I'm confirming it. And that's the cycle, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And that's how we can remove some of the silos and manage some of the handoffs, almost eliminate the handoffs from the process. And the real power of this approach in our mind is we get the real-time feedback from the user requirements, which downstream eliminates the flood of change orders that roll in after the deploy phase.
Can you describe what you mean by the document part of that cycle?
Well, in any process discovery, as I'm sure there are a lot of process engineers out there, we're documenting the process as the users are describing it to us. That documentation oftentimes takes the form of a Visio process map. PowerPoint is oftentimes used for it. There are a lot of really great tools in the world out there for doing that process documentation. And actually, when I first began doing BPM, I was working with one of the best tools I thought in the world. The missing element was it was just documentation, and it was a nice picture with a lot of words and whatnot. And when I would hand it to a client in a nice portfolio, it would end up on the shelf, and people would say, "Yeah, we do that." The real beauty of this approach is that documentation translates into a live system through the sequence technology. And so no longer do you have documentation that says, yeah, we'll do that process. You have an underlying software product that is driven by that documentation that enforces that process. And that's the reason we like to use this in the energy field in the U.S. and utility field, because it's a highly, highly regulated industry where saying you do something isn't enough. You're routinely audited by regulatory authorities to prove that you do what you say. And that's the important thing about the documentation that we create during this process and the subsequent validation of that documentation.
Okay. So, and now what about the production element of this diagram? I see that once the handoff does take place, once the product is sufficiently ready, at least in the first cycle, it goes to production, and then there's a hot change logo. What does that refer to?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's important to corporate IT is, and even Sarbanes-Oxley regulations in the U.S. And perhaps even in the UK or in Europe have dictated that companies control the processes by which they conduct business. And the hot change technology allows us to do that within this environment because, as you can imagine, if you're in a cyclical, iterative process, discovery, software development cycle, you could almost spin out of control with changes. And you can't allow those changes to become overwhelming and destabilizing to a production IT environment. And the way we approach it is we develop through the cycle the software, as it were, but once the software moves into production, you're really in a different world. And in that different world, you have to do things like manage issues, control changes, conduct training, organizational change, all the traditional things that you do in any software development cycle. The important thing to note here, though, and again focusing on our accelerated time phasing of the system, we want to be able to evolve the system very rapidly as new regulatory rules are enforced and as our business needs change and our customers' needs change. And the hot change technology allows us, in kind of an engineering sense, to identify those changes that we are preparing to move to production and move those to production in a very orderly kind of fashion and time phase those in to say, for example, we want such and such changes to move into production and affect our users on Tuesday of next week or Tuesday of every week, which is a very common update cycle, at least in the U.S. And hot change allows us to make the changes to the process, ergo the software, move those to production, and not adversely affect the existing processes that are in the running state, and not to adversely affect users. And that's a very important piece because your software is going to change because your processes are going to change because your user needs are going to change and your client needs are going to change, and change is just inevitable. And the hot change technology really makes that manageable in a high volume production environment.
Okay, and just to clarify, hot change is the technology which powers PNMsoft Sequence. It's behind all of its features, so it's an enabling technology. Okay, shall we move on?
Sure.
Okay, so why does this method that you've come up with, Evolutionary BPM, why does it work better than the other methods or the other method?
Okay, let me explain a little bit what's different here. No silos. Silos are bad, handoffs are bad, we remember that. So we want to eliminate the silos because the silos don't talk to each other by definition. They only talk to each other through a one-way street called a handoff, so we eliminate those. Then we collapse the time. One of the worst things I've seen in software development and implementation, particularly in my experience, has been many software development efforts span 2 years before you see any end result. And 2 years is unacceptable from a business standpoint. In 2 years, all your business requirements have already changed. So it's unacceptable in my mind to draw out a development for that period of time. But in order to do that, you've got to eliminate the silos. You've got to move into a very time-constrained iterative cycle like we deploy here, so that we can very rapidly develop this system. We use documentation, not programming. That's one of the advantages of the Sequence tool. Is you can develop, as Ellie's going to demonstrate to us in a minute, you can develop a working business process software with no programming, zero programming. And that is incredibly attractive because now our business analysts, our business users, power users, if you will, who are trained in process engineering techniques, can now use those techniques to, in effect, build the software by simply documenting it, validating it, not testing. There is no official testing cycle because the testing is built into the cycle. You're testing every day, so there's really no end test period that we have to endure. The output of that is a fully functional process-oriented software system. Again, that's because of the Sequence technology that Ellie is going to show you. And of course, hot changes are managed, as I explained, which is an absolute necessity once you move into a high-volume production environment.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so you've talked about the theory, how it works. Can you give us a real example of an actual business problem which you or your customers solved using this method?
Sure, Ellie. We do a lot of work in the utility industry in the U.S. And it's a great industry from the standpoint that process techniques such as ours are relatively in their infancy in this industry. It's a very old industry. It's more of a construction-oriented industry. It's under high pressure from government entities for regulatory compliance against factors that might affect the safety and well-being of the citizenry. And we have developed a process using sequence called the damage investigation process, such that every time that there is a damage, and last year we processed 1,500 damages through this software to the tune of millions of dollars in damages. Anytime there is a damage, there is a group of players that are involved in investigating this damage. There might be a couple of sectors on the job site at the time that the damage has actually occurred. There will be engineers in the background who have to do calculations in terms of, okay, what's the extent of the damage in terms of gas loss in this particular case. There are other managers who are involved in the approval and review process. There are government entities who are also involved. When damages exceed a certain level, then you're obligated as a pipeline operator to notify those entities.
Okay, so there are incredible amount of entities that need to be updated. I just want to remind, we have about 50 minutes for this webinar, so maybe we'll move it along to the next part.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I move to the next slide, Bruce?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So maybe you can go through the steps of this example then?
Sure, I will. To develop this process that we offer today to this industry, these are the important steps that we use to develop it, and they follow our methodology. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide the inputs to our process: business analysts, IT governance, process stakeholders, information required by the process, information provided by the process. And you can read the steps where we identify and document the components. That's the big thing. It's the Visio kind of thing. Identify and document what are the big activities. Then we identify the data elements, who needs what at what step of the process. We can add some special features, and all this is being done by business analysts in a conference room with stakeholders present. It's done on the fly. It's not documented in Word or in PowerPoint and then handed off to somebody. It's actually done on the fly, and the users are actually testing in sequence the very things that they're building at that time. Step 4, we finalize the training and organizational change. Notice there's no major test period here because the testing is actually integrated into the process. We finalize our training organizational change, and we pilot our first deployment, and the key is to do that very rapidly to get an early win.
Okay, and that's the first deployment, and then I see step 6 is to continue deployment. So that's not the end. It doesn't end there, but you have continued deployments going through the cycle each time. I actually had a question for you. After the first deployment, let's say we're into the second deployment, do you go back to step 1 to the identify and document, or do you go back to a later step in subsequent deployments?
When I'm thinking of subsequent deployments, I'm thinking of subsequent deployments of the same process. And if I've done my job well in the iterative cycle, there's really no need to visit that in earnest as a major initiative. Typically, we're managing the issues. Maybe there's something we overlook, or maybe there's a caveat in the process that a user in maybe a remote area experiences that the core group of stakeholders were not necessarily aware of and whatnot. And rather than go back all the way to the beginning as we would in a silo approach, that's when we step into the iterative process, we design in that requirement, and then we use our hot change technology in order to implement that requirement.
So effectively, the first iteration looks different than subsequent iterations.
Yes, it's much more involved the first iteration through for a given process, but because that's more process development, process discovery versus process change, process management, which is more downstream. Because once you're through your first deployment, the proof is really in the pudding on how well you did that. Now, there is a period in here where you need to rest and let things stabilize a little bit, let the users become adjusted to the new system. All the while, we're hoping that if we did a good job upstream in the cycle, that we're not seeing a lot of change notices. We're seeing small issues. Most of those issues may be simply, user training issues. Once we work through all those issues, then going into a continuous deployment cycle is very feasible, and you can deploy this thing very rapidly after that.
Okay. Great answer. right now we're actually going to take a little break from the questions, and as you mentioned, Bruce, we're going to show a quick demo of how easy it is to evolve a process using PNMsoft Sequence, how easy it is to document, model the process using the visual canvas in Sequence's App Studio. And the important thing to show is that PNMsoft Sequence can be used by power users, by business analysts, by those who don't want to be involved and maybe can't be involved in programming. And it can be used by advanced developers who do want to be involved, who need to get involved in the programming side. It has a lot of powerful tools for developers that actually save them time so they don't have to program too much. So right now, especially in this webinar, we're focusing on the power user side, the power user functionality, and this short demo is going to show you how a power user, like Bruce is speaking about, very quickly gets that process up and running. So bear with me for just a moment while I adjust the settings here. It'll take about 10 seconds, and then we'll start with the demo.
Welcome to Creating Business Process Applications Quickly, an introduction to the Sequence Kinetics App Studio. In this video, you will learn how to build business process applications quickly and without programming using Sequence Kinetics App Studio. You can watch other videos in this series on advanced process design, process management, and administration. Tanya is an account manager for Solera, a solar energy provider who just won a major tender from a strategic customer. Tanya needs to quickly create an application which enables the speedy processing of orders from this customer. The request details must be captured in a web form, and these must be sent to Solera's provisioning department, engineering department, and the billing department, each of which must complete a task to provide the customer with the service it purchased. As a power user, Tanya can quickly build this process using Sequence Kinetics without any programming. In the administration environment, Tanya can manage her business process applications. She starts by clicking here to create a new workflow. She gives the workflow a name and a description and clicks Next. Now she is in the App Studio, an environment which gives her easy-to-use tools to build and edit workflows and other application components. Tanya can add activities to her workflow from a toolbox, view and edit workflow and activity properties, and perform useful actions on her workflow using the top ribbon. First, Tanya needs to model her business process. The App Studio enables her to do this quickly before she gets down to the details. Tanya clicks Form to add the initial web form to the workflow. She positions it on the canvas and connects it to the Start activity. Tanya adds 3 task activities to the workflow. These tasks will be given to each Solera department. Finally, she adds a message activity to notify the order initiator that the order has been provided. She connects each of these activities together, and in seconds, she has completed modeling her workflow. Now Tanya needs to define each activity, starting with the user interface. She double-clicks the form. A wizard appears, enabling her to define the form's name and description, and creation method. Tanya will use the View First method to create this form. Tanya selects the creation mode of the form. She can pick from a variety of templates and form types. She selects a one-column form. Tanya is now in the UX Studio. Here, she can add fields to the form from a toolbox, edit field properties, and perform common actions from the top ribbon. She adds fields to the form, such as the customer's details and service he is ordering, and the date the order is needed by. Adding combo box values is easy using a quick editor. Within a few minutes, she's done building her first form. We'll spend more time in the UX Studio in the Advanced Process Design video. Once Tanya has finished editing her form, she saves it and continues to edit her application. She defines tasks for each department in a similar way. For tasks, she also needs to define how a message is sent to the correct task recipient. Sequence Kinetics Message Wizard enables her to define rich text messages and even include data from the workflow in her message. She can select the members of the organization who will receive the message by role and department, and decide on how tasks will be delivered in a queue. Tanya can even define that a specific task is one-click enabled, meaning that it can be received on a user's mobile phone and approved or declined in one click. To make her workflow more orderly and understandable, she can add swim lanes and comments. After Tanya has finished defining her workflow's activities, she can validate and preview the workflow execution to iron out any issues it may have. Now Tanya's application is complete. Users can run this application in Sequence Kinetics FlowTime environment. Here, users can kick off the application, managers can monitor its execution with visual dashboards, and department members can complete its tasks either via PC or on Process to Go, Sequence Kinetics mobile environment. We'll go more into depth on FlowTime and Process to Go in the Managing Processes video. To sum up, Sequence Kinetics has enabled Tanya to quickly build a business process application. This application will help her department process orders more efficiently and ensure that services are provided quickly and via multiple platforms. Tanya did this with no programming, which also means she can easily change the application over time. Sequence Kinetics, the power to model, build, and execute business process applications with zero programming. Sequence Kinetics, put your business processes in motion.
Okay, we're back. So, Bruce, you there?
Yes, I'm here, Ellie.
Okay, so I think what we saw in that short demo was how PNMsoft Sequence enables your the evolutionary BPM approach, which you're speaking about, because it enables the designers, who in many cases are business analysts, to put together, to document the process, to model it, and design it very rapidly in a visual manner, to lay it out on a canvas, almost in a Visio-like manner, but more powerful because they're actually creating the process as they're modeling it, and they can have it up and running very quickly. And with the hot change technology, all parties are able to control change over the process as change is needed in real world situations. So that actually takes me to the next question for you. If you're just joining us now, we're speaking with Bruce Hardy of Solutions BPM, a U.S. PNMsoft partner. So Bruce, what are the greatest challenges for a BPM project?
Okay, Ellie, let me just say that this is a really powerful tool set, and we've used it, like I say, for 5 years, and it's really reinvented the way we develop software at our clients. And but some of the same old issues exist, and we all know very much what these issues might be. Number one is user adoption and commitment to change. Anytime there's major change going on in an organization of any system or any reorganization or ownership change or process change, you're going to get some challenge from the users, and we manage that, and we manage it aggressively as all managers of projects should do. So I don't think there's anything really new under the sun there. But one of the things that we do manage a little differently is IT acceptance. IT will look at the tool set, and if they're used to writing things in C# or Java or whatever, they will question, which is step 3, they will question the robustness of a tool that can be done by a non-professional software developer, in this case a business analyst. And we manage that acceptance and that skepticism quite aggressively by demonstrating compliance to accepted IT practices, ergo the hot change. We protect the production environments, and we manage the change in that production environments in a professional way. And IT appreciates that that approach. We also involve them in projects as trusted advisors. There's a role for IT in this, and that role is, of course, we manage servers, we manage SQL Server, we want lots of reports out of the system, which are really beneficial to our customers, and we involve IT in that. We actually run this solution in a cloud environment, and we have IT professionals behind the scenes. Even though the users don't see them, they're behind the scenes making this whole thing work. And as Ellie, as you mentioned before, let's allow them opportunities to improve or even build on the BPM models. All this doesn't have to be done by a business analyst. A lot of it can be done by an IT person, particularly the type of IT people who tend to be quasi-business professionals themselves. And one thing that I would like to address is the stereotype that, in my mind, this is a Visio on steroids. It is somewhat a Visio on steroids, but the capabilities are far more advanced than you could imagine unless you do this yourself. And a case in point, we actually have a customer that we've been running this application at for over 5 years, and they have 800 concurrent users on the system, and they have hundreds of thousands of transactions annually through the system, and it's become a very mission-critical component of their organization IT structure. And I think that is proof positive to the robustness of the tool set itself, and I think IT would be very accepting to that.
Okay, very good. So if you can kind of sum it up in a way, what are the key elements of the success of a BPM project?
Okay, again, the important thing that I mentioned earlier was collapsing the time frame. And I think that's very, very important nowadays. Because clients, in my clients in particular, tend to be very risk adverse and very cost conscious. They have ratepayers that are accountable to regulatory authorities for the money they spend. So they need to do it wisely. And one of the things that we always recommend at our clients is the selection of the first project is absolutely essential. You don't have to build out the entire system. We didn't do that. Systems tend to evolve over time as you get control of one process, and then you say, let's take these techniques to another process. It's important that that first project is important to the stakeholders, and you have visibility to decision makers, and there has to be widely accepted business impact potential. Those are very important elements in selecting that first project. And then, as always, seek rapid ROI. Get live quickly and address the issues and stabilize the system and start returning value back to the organization, back to the users, and ever most importantly, back to the managers and the shareholders and the ratepayers. Those are very important things. And you can do a lot of that through excellent training and support. There's nothing new about that. We spend a lot of time. We have a 24/7 help desk that my organization actually runs for our clients. 24/7, training and support. We're always there for you. And anytime issues come up, we're there for you as well. We have 24/7 support. And even in our contracts with our clients, we build in things like response times on the system, response times to issues, things of that nature. And those things are very, very important for the satisfaction and the success of any of these types of projects.
Well, let me stop you here for a second, Bruce. I see there's really a heavy emphasis here on the time element, on the rapidity, rapidness, rapid ROI, quick go lives, respond to issues quickly. Is it more important to be fast in a BPM project than in another kind of software project? Is there some reason why for BPM speed is even more important?
I think it's more important from a business standpoint, no matter the technology or the methods that you use, because businesses have limited funds available, and they have limited time to respond to things like user issues and customer issues and regulatory issues. And so I think it's very, very important to be able to move quickly. And I've worked on a number of projects throughout my career. I was a senior supply chain manager at a large consulting company, and we tended to draw projects out. We'd go on a project, and we'd be there for years. And it would be a year or 2 years down the road and millions of dollars spent before the business saw any benefits whatsoever from the work that we were doing. And that's why I look at it today and say, well, if it were my money, in many cases, it is because I'm a ratepayer to many of my customers. I want to see quick improvement. I want to see quick savings. I want to see quick adherence and safety to regulatory requirements, et cetera. That's why I think time is of the essence when you're doing these type of projects. And maybe even more importantly than anything is projects tend to lose momentum over time. Morale tends to degrade, and that's really hard to manage in a large project when people aren't seeing things happen. You know, they're not getting excited about success. And that's why in the BPM projects that we do, we go after successes early, and we prove ourselves as we go, and we try to return that ROI so that you're getting something back for the money you're spending.
Okay, it makes sense. I guess I would also think perhaps with BPM especially, a BPM project is taken on by an organization when they want to improve efficiency. Let's say they feel they're spending too much time getting something done, and the idea is that BPM is going to make it more efficient and save time. So I guess that would mean that the project itself needs to be done quickly, because otherwise it goes against the very reason that the project was taken on in the first place, which was to save time. So I think maybe that's why for BPM specifically, possibly the time element is even more important than a traditional software project. Okay, well, Bruce, thank you so much for stay on with me here, because I value your expertise and your input as we come to the last section of the webinar. But I want to thank you for answering those questions. I think that you provided a lot of great ideas for everyone listening here today, and a lot of your wide experience, over the years, and kind of putting this kind of new methodology together and presenting it to people in a coherent way. I think in this webinar, to kind of sum up what we've seen here so far about evolutionary BPM, we're not reinventing the wheel. The iterative, cyclical, quick approach, we haven't invented that. That approach came about through what we talked about earlier. When I'll bring it back to my original question: how does BPM fit in between waterfall and agile? And clearly, we're fitting it in the agile side. And we're going with the agile. That's clearly the way for BPM. But I think the new innovation, the new idea that we're bringing here in this webinar is how that looks in BPM. How does that agile approach translate into a BPM project? And that's the innovation here. The evolutionary BPM is specifically in a BPM project how that agile approach looks, and that is that's, I would say, the innovation of this webinar. This is just to take a look at it again. We're seeing the cyclical validation, design, document in a cycle, then the handoff to production. When the process is in production, the ability to change it rapidly with control using Sequence's hot change technology, which is the base of all of Sequence's features. And then the feedback, managing issues, managing change, coming back for the next iteration of the cycle, and then continuing with iterations as the process improves over time. And here again, this is just a way to take a look at what hot change looks like, or how we look at it here at PNMsoft. Hot change there in the middle. It's change tools which encompass many of our features, or all of our features really, enabling that quick, rapid change while a project is already in production. And that is also, you've also got the inner circle there of control. So you can't let the change go out of control. You have to know who's making changes, what changes are being made, and Sequence also includes those tools to enable BPM project managers and administrators to see and manage the changes and control them. That means administration tables. It means permissions, managing permissions, logs, source safe. Those are the tools which enable the change to happen in a controlled manner. So we've had some very successful implementations recently that had to do with CRM. And just want to quickly mention a case study here of a utilities company that we work with, that we created an intelligent workflow for them, a BPM workflow for their dynamic CRM. It's really a BPM plus CRM project. And the workflow, the challenge was to ensure that customer service requests were handled in an optimal manner. And the way that the solution rapidly evolved here is that first there was that initial meeting to discuss, to model the workflow using a special edition of our product, a PNMsoft sequence called PNMsoft SCE. That stands for Sequence CRM Edition, and that's a new edition of our product specifically tailored to integrate with Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And this model included all the activities that were necessary in order to handle customer service requests, and there was that validation that the stakeholders made in order to validate that the flow was indeed what was required. Then there was a stage of actually building out the forms and the data and the fields, populating them, and connecting the process to the CRM case entity in Dynamics CRM. The workflow then very quickly was tested, went live, and into its first release, and quite rapidly that release already garnered a 60% improvement in the speed of handling service requests, and that was a good win, a quick win. Monitoring showed that there was a bottleneck at a certain specific area, approval area of the process, so that went around for the second iteration, and during that second iteration, after it was implemented, service improved by an additional 30%. So that's just an example of how the evolutionary BPM methodology is used in a specific BPM plus CRM project. Just to give you a quick look, and we're very excited, obviously, about this new edition, this special edition of PNMsoft Sequence, PNMsoft Sequence CRM edition, and this is how it looks actually in Dynamics CRM. You can see that you can actually see where the process stands, where the workflow stands from within the CRM interface. So it's really a very tight integration, which doesn't really exist anywhere. It's a unique product in that manner. Okay, so now we're going to go to some questions that you've asked here. We have several audience questions, and give me a moment here to look them over. And I think more than we can handle, but we'll try to ask and field a few, Bruce and I together. You can still ask some more here in your questions widget, and we'll try to get to them. Okay, so one question here is hot change a piece of software or is it a process? So hot change is actually two things. It's a concept and it's a technology. The concept is being able to change and control change as a process runs in production. That's the idea. And there are many kinds of changes. There could be a change in the way the device is used. Maybe you need the workflow to function on a mobile device. Maybe you need to change part of the flow of the process itself. Maybe there needs to be a new flow activity, an if and else, a split activity. It could be that you need to integrate with another technology, another ERP system. So hot change is the DNA, I would say, of PNMsoft Sequence. It's what it permeates all of our product, and it enables that rapid change while processes are already in production. I hope that answers the question. We could have a whole webinar on that, but okay. Next question. I want to find a good question for you, Bruce. Hold on a second. Okay. Maybe Bruce, you can field this one. Is this approach unique to PNMsoft, or are other intelligent BPM providers doing similar agile development? Maybe maybe you can try to field this one, Bruce.
That's a good question. The portability of the process methodology that we employ is definitely there. When we first began doing it this way, we actually did it on PowerPoint slides. We would mock up user screens, and we would create process charts, and we would do all this, but we really didn't have a good tool for doing it, and we had no tool for testing it. So you have users sitting in a conference room, role-playing, as it were, using PowerPoint slides with fields on them and making choices, et cetera, and we're documenting those results. There was really no validation because you're asking users to describe something they've really never seen. And it wasn't until I came across Sequence that I was able to actually, it's kind of like, Frosty the Snowman when you put that old silk hat on it comes to life. And in a conference room with a bunch of users, and in the course of 2 or 3 days, you can actually document a process, validate that process with the users, and turn that process into a working piece of software. Is quite a powerful notion. And it wasn't, like I say, until I began using Sequence that I really experienced that kind of power in this.
Okay, great. Okay, another question maybe, Bruce, you can take is, if testing every day is part of the model, doesn't that require a dedicated testing resource?
Not really, because the users are doing the testing, the stakeholders in this case. And like I say, when I'm sitting in a conference room with a bunch of stakeholders and we're documenting this process, and I publish this out to my website so that it's live, they can get to it through Internet Explorer, for example. I actually have them log in, all of them. I have them log in, and I have them go through the software, entering information, making choices, exercising decision points within the software, actually doing that as we build it out. And we don't move forward until it works. And downstream, we might discover something, oh, you know, maybe that's a good idea, we should incorporate that, or that's something we forgot. We can always go back and do that while we're in that session. But the important thing for us is to know when we walk out of that session that everything that's been discussed as a requirement is incorporated into the product. It's been unit tested, as it were, and the users have actually exercised it and validated it. And then towards the end of the session, we do end-to-end system testing where the users will all get into a room, and it's pretend role play where one user does one thing, that triggers another user to perform an activity, which triggers another user downstream to perform an activity. And believe it or not, you can actually do all that and walk away from, you know, a 2 or 3 day meeting with users and have something that is very robust and well designed.
Okay. Good answer. We have another question. This is kind of a big question, so we'll try to keep the answer short here. What are the challenges to manage system integration with other systems as part of the business process?
That's a really good question, and we've done a lot of that, and we have integration points in one of our utility offerings to a number of third-party providers. It could be external contractors, they could be external regulatory systems, and we do it a number of ways. And this is where your IT guys can really play a significant role, because we have integration points where we use FTP to an external system, we use web services to an external system, we can use APIs to an external system, particularly systems within a given firewall. And there are a lot of issues associated with like security, encryption, auditing to make sure that the updates between the two systems are happening in such a way that both systems are accurate and timely. Those are important matters, and that's where your IT guys can really play a significant role in this.
Okay, I'm going to just ask one more question because we're running out of time. I'm sorry I'm not able to field. We have about 15, 20 questions here. Paul is asking, in the context of design, document, and validate, when does one build, assuming that the process element is not part of the native Sequence BPM product, but requires building? I think maybe I'll try to take that one. I think that the build is starting in that initial cycle of design, and the build is taking place in Sequence. I think that's the answer here. Is that
I think there's another perspective on that, because what we've had to do in a number of our solutions is Sequence didn't have a capability, for example, for Google Maps, for example, and at this time, and so we had to build the Google Map component, and that's an aside to the actual process development, and we had to hire IT guys come in, build out that module, incorporate that module into our process, and we did that as early as the specifications and requirements were available to us so that we could incorporate that into our unit testing as we went along.
Okay. Right. So look, Sequence provides a whole set of out-of-the-box activities which are already pre-built, such as connection to SAP, connection to Dynamics CRM, if as part of the PNMsoft SCE product edition, and web service, WCF activities. So a lot of the components are pre-built, and you don't need, you don't, even if you are a developer, you don't need to code that, you don't need to build that out. I'm aware that you can add in a Google Maps widget very easily within the markup of the form, even though there isn't a Google Maps activity yet per se, but it's quite easy to integrate that. So I think that the real line here, the point here is the flexibility. Sure, you've got a whole set of out-of-the-box features, but it's very easy to extend those features. It's very easy to create new activities that for your custom needs, because we actually have the ability to create a custom activity, which is then available for you afterwards, and it's part of the toolbox in the App Studio. Okay, well, a lot more questions here. I encourage you to don't throw out those questions. Send them in to us. You can email myself and Bruce. We'll get to the contact information in a moment. I guess just to sum up, we talked about waterfall versus agile. We heard your story of how you developed the evolutionary BPM approach, Bruce. And we took a quick look at a case study, and we dealt with some of your questions. We saw the demo as well in PNMsoft Sequence itself, how easy it is for power users and business analysts to model and design processes that actually work and that provide value. Just hear just a little bit about PNMsoft as a company, and of course you can go to www.pnmsoft.com to find out more. A little bit about some of our customers of PNMsoft Sequence, and that's the webinar for today. Bruce, I want to thank you very much for being with us. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Ellie.
And for those of you who want to contact us, our emails are there, les@pnmsoft.com, bruce.hardy@solutionsbpm.com, and of course we're available for any of your questions about evolutionary BPM, and we want to help you make your projects a success. Thanks very much for being with us, folks. The recording of the webinar will be on pnmsoft.com under Resources, Webinars, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinars. Thank you and have a great day.